No.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Presence Posse. We're presenting the topic presence and presence and happiness. And it looks like Malcolm's already on it. Shall we start with letting people know who you are? And Malcolm, since you're already dancing, how about you present yourself?
Yeah, okay. My name is Malcolm. Now, my name is, well, I'm
What
calling
more could be added to that?
My name is Malcolm Free. I'm a health coach, neuro coach, law of attraction type of guy. So, we'll be talking about a few things here today as far as happiness.
Fred?
Good evening to our legions of fans and followers. Dr. Fred Blum. I'm trying on a new prefix this time. Someone said recalibration coach. They said try that. So I'm going to try that.
What does that mean?
Well, it's purposely vague, I guess, isn't it? So people are going to have to figure that out by talking with me. But essentially what it means is I help people make the shift from the pain and the suffering that is intrinsic to living as an ego, as a belief in this idea that I am this separate self-personality, towards the understanding, the knowing of who we really are, what I call the true self, whose very nature is already peace and love and clarity and freedom. And it's right there, always closer than your next breath. We just have to see it for what it is.
Ooh.
Beautiful. Now I actually have to ask you, recalibration?
Recalibrate, yes. So, I mean, I don't know, somebody just
where does that come in?
Well, great. So we recalibrate our experience of life from this ego towards this true self. Maybe that's a way we could say it.
Okay, super.
Recalibrate your perspective.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. I wanted to make sure that was even clearer in case people had questions. And you can still, anybody who's watching, you can still ask questions if you're not clear, but I was trying to help. And I am, oops, I have just made a mistake on my screen. There we go. I am Miriam Siegel, and I'm just several different things. I help people. What do I help people do? I help people get from being not knowing where they're going to being actually on the way to where they're going, and sometimes even getting there. Because sometimes people don't necessarily know where they're going, but they can get to clear about where they think they want to go. And then when they start moving, they realize they need to go somewhere else. So I help along that journey. That's one of the things I do. There was something you just said, Fred, that had me actually thinking about our topic today. And I'm trying to figure out what it was. But it'll come to me, or you guys can help me. Because one of the things I do is psychodrama. And we have something called sociometry. And sociometry is how people interact. If I just put it sort of a simple version of that, it's how people interact and noticing how groups of people interact and assigning roles. So a lot of the times in sociometry, you'll notice how people interact, and then you'll notice who's the scapegoat. There's something called the positive star and the negative star. And then there'll be like all kinds of roles that people have in groups, the mediator, the whatever. And being a person who's been working on or training probably and practicing presence for a long time, I actually have a real challenge with sociometry because I don't go to roles. Like I can see where people interact, but the idea of putting roles on people confuses the living daylights out of me, because within presence, being in the moment, I think it's something you were talking about, ego, that triggered this thought for me. Nobody's a role. I mean, they're not a scapegoat. They're not a positive star. It's just there's a moment and something happens in the moment, and then there's a new moment, and then something happens in that moment. And I have trouble with that role thing. And it kind of connects me to the ego, because the ego can be a sort of who I think I am.
Well, the ego is who plays the role. Who else would play it?
Yeah. Because
Right.
I mean, when you talk about true self and not true self, I
Yeah.
mean, whatever words you want to call it, free energy or whatever flow. I see. I just my brain goes roll. I don't understand it all, but it makes sense when I hear you talk about ego and true self. The ego will
Yeah.
be any kind of identity we put on ourselves, anything we identify ourselves with, or other people identify us with. So if someone sees me as a scapegoat, or someone sees me as and now since our topic is happiness, who sees me as a happy person?
What the hell?
Oh,
Are we back?
yes. Were you
You
gone?
never left.
I really?
Yeah.
Sorry for every yeah, you guys all disappeared off my screen for a second.
Actually, it was really cool timing because I'd said something about some people seeing me as a happy person, and then you had said, "What the hell?"
There are no accidents. Yeah, I don't know. My whole thing went blank for a second, but apparently we're back. So the ego. I was saying that there are parts of the ego that have become very core to us, like they're almost unquestioned or unseen, kind of like water to a fish. And I think those parts probably do have sort of intrinsic roles that they've taken on, which are just aspects of the personality. Somebody is going to be the authority figure, somebody else is going to be the follower, just in most areas of life. But it's none of that is who we are. That's the part that I emphasize. All of that are literally roles, just like a role in a play.
Mhm.
And I would, to get right to the point of our discussion today, I would hazard my own idea that your degree of happiness, of true, like authentic happiness, is directly proportional to the degree of identification we have with ego versus our true self.
That makes sense to me, and we are going to talk more about that.
I'm sure we are.
I'm going to I'm going to you any second, Malcolm, because I'm interested in what you have to say about happiness and hormones and the way the brain works and all of that. And tons of stuff, other stuff that you also talk about. You're my neuro guy, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. I think one of the things I'm going to use your words, Fred, the true self, or for me, the core, or whatever. I don't look for roles, I think, because I want to move like I'm with the true self. If I'm focusing on roles, I'm not present to what is. I'm present
Right.
to what seems to be.
You're filtering it through that role.
Yeah, and I think it distracts from it. How am I going to get to a good, clear, pure connection with the core of a person, the source of person, if I'm focused on a role? It's automatically distracting me from the essence of the human being that I'm with. So I think that's part of what I find difficult with sort of ego and roles and this sort of thing. And happiness, since we're on this theme, the resistance, like roles have a way of kind of getting in the way. There's resistance to being present, to just being and flowing and getting stuck. And then can be difficult to feel the flow of happiness when identified with roles, is my experience. And Malcolm, I see you moving around, so go for it.
Oh, I was just listening, man. That's interesting. But you know what I'm saying, with happiness, right? And of course for me, if you don't define what happiness is, right, then it's hard to define, right? You have to define what happiness is to you. And what route to take to be happy, right? As far as like what Fred was saying, right? You generate a habit of taking a specific role in certain situations, right? To a point that you get like a clown with 1,000 faces, right? One minute you got the red nose on, next minute you got the frown or the smile on. It depends on the situation that you're under. Like sometimes when you're with your parents, you take on a certain role. When you're with your children, you take on a certain role. When you're with your friends, right, you take on a certain role. When you're at school, you take on a certain type of role. All of these different roles. All of these are you, but not truly you, right? Every last one of these are you in those specific roles, but is it truly you? And I would say no, right? You know what I'm saying? Because if that was truly who you were, then you wouldn't be flip flopping between the roles, if you know what I mean. So happiness, you know what I'm saying, for me, for one, you know what I'm saying, is to define what happiness is and know what you're working toward. When it comes to, the brain and all that, at any given moment right now, you have a melody of hormones and chemicals running through your body. And, all it takes is what triggers what you feel is happiness. What triggers that in your brain? What triggers that throughout your body? Because it's not just the brain that's responding to this happiness, it's your entire body that's responding to this happiness, right? So, you know what I'm saying? So, once again, getting back to it, we have a habit. We have created habits in certain situations to take certain roles. But to define what happiness is to ourselves, to really understand, first you got to define it. And I guess that's my main point right now, is to define what that is. Sometimes you can find happiness and not even know that's making you happy until later. Like, you know what, I was really happy about that. Right. So, you know what I'm saying? But if you understand that this is what I consider happiness, and you shape yourself and form yourself to achieve that happiness, then I think you're closer to your true self and not living off your ego, more or less.
I knew you were going to say something, Fred, because the
I
hand.
saw the I saw, no, I saw the wheel. I saw the wheels turning.
Go for it, Fred.
You could smell the wheels turning. You want me to go? All right, I'll go. First of all, I love the thing, Malcolm, that you said about feeling happiness in your whole body. If you guys or any of our viewers know the name Candace Pert, she wrote a book, it's got to be 20 years ago now, called Molecules of Emotion, Neuropeptides, that literally these molecules are what cause us to have the experience, the somatic physical experience of emotion. And it turns out the vast concentration of these are not in your head. They're in your gut, in your heart, in, areas like that. So, gut feeling, feeling it in your heart, that's legit. And that's a whole other topic, really.
Yes.
But,
Yes.
but yeah, it's interesting because like when you talk about defining happiness, there's a couple of ways we might do. So we could say happiness as related to an outcome or a circumstance. And there's nothing wrong with that on one level. So for example, I'm so happy when I'm with my grandchildren. I don't actually have grandchildren, but I don't know why I said that, but you get the idea. So stuff like that, where we say, it would be foolish, even like from the most spiritual perspective, to deny that we tend to find happiness in certain circumstances. Okay. So that's one way of talking about this for sure, which is what I heard Malcolm saying. But then, there's a different kind of happiness when you see, a baby or a very young child that's just happy, that isn't happy because of anything. We're talking about something else, which is really akin to what I mean when I talk about true self or true nature or essential self. It's that there are certain qualities that are just part of our factory settings. And happiness is one of those, as is peace and love and authenticity and freedom. So, and why I said what I said a minute ago about it doesn't, because like you could say, well, I'm just happy then. I don't need anything in my life to make me happy. And I would agree with you. And we're both in the world and not of the world. So while we're in the world, we might as well make it, enjoyable and fun as hell, and find those things that seem to maybe not like make us happy so much as enhance, that natural state of happiness. Because one, I think, is always present if we could only just see it. It's hard to see sometimes, I know. Hence the tragedy of many people's lives.
Right. You know, when you talk about happiness, like from a child or a baby, that's something that's natural, and
Mm-hmm.
we don't it doesn't leave us, right? Because sometimes, like you said, just being alone, I can find happiness. I can find peace and happiness. Just peace, just being alone.
Yeah, doing nothing, sitting alone
Right.
in a room.
Do absolutely nothing, right? And be happy, right? As long as ain't nobody bothering me, I'm good. But, you know what I'm saying? And it never leaves us. The thing is, I, I want to say convolute our lives with so much drama, right? With so much energy that's not that energy, that we sometimes forget that all I need is peace and I can find happiness.
That's the ego. That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
That's the convolution that you're talking about.
We talking about the same thing. We just word
Yeah,
it differently.
that's right.
So, so happiness is there, man. You just have to be willing to find it within yourself, right? You just have to be willing to sit back and find it, man. It's there, right? You just, no matter what you're going through, you can find happiness for yourself. You might not find happiness in the situation, but you can
Right.
find happiness for yourself.
Can I jump in here for a second? Because I'm hearing find happiness. And I think it's really interesting how we talk about similar things, but we have different ways of wording it. And that also speaks to different people's, how they need to hear things or how they understand
Right.
things, which is great. Finding happiness. I have an experience of, allowing happiness, where I don't have to go out and find it. I have to get out of my own way so that I can experience it because it's there. And
I think we're saying the same thing, though. I think it's just, like Alan Watts, if you're familiar with Alan Watts, the spiritual teacher back in the 70s and 60s and 70s mainly, he talked about us playing hide and go seek with ourselves, So it's the same idea that you're saying, find it, discover it, allow it,
Yeah. Yeah. I think the wording is important, and I want to sort of bring that, because to me, and anybody who might be like me, finding happiness sounds quite active, like going to look for it. Whereas for me, allowing happiness is actually not doing.
Yeah, I'm not in disagreement with that. I mean, if you read majority of my posts, I'm telling you to allow, right? I'm telling people to allow something to be, you know what I mean? And, I'm saying that, once again, it's a play on words, I'm saying, where, like Doc said, man, I'm saying, you find it, I'm saying, you research it, do what you got to do, and then you allow it. I'm saying? I think it's sometimes when we're speaking, especially from a coaching perspective, I'm saying, like, if my common word when speaking to a person or a client is allow, right? No matter what we're talking about, I'm saying allow, 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 allow. Then that's what they're conditioned to work with, right? If I'm saying fine, 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 that's what they're conditioned to work with until I change it to allow. Right now that you find it, I found it. This is what you want. Is this what you want? Are you sure that's what you want? Okay, now that we found out what you want, now let's allow this process to take place. So it's, you can look at it as a stepping stone if you want to, like from find to allow, or however you want to word that. But, I'm saying, it's just, your speaking, my speaking, his speaking, and their understanding of what the process is when it comes to finding and allowing. But at the end of the day, you're getting to actually getting them to allow themselves to be, do, and have what they're in search of.
So how is
happiness? Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how does figuring out what you want connect with happiness? I mean, there are ways to look at that. Like there's I want a new car, and when I get the new car, I'm going to be happy. And I don't disagree with that.
You gotta
It's
be
like, okay, if
careful
you
with
actually
that,
want a new car and you get a new car and you feel really happy, yay.
For how long though?
Yeah, but as
2
long
hours.
as you have the car, perhaps. It depends on the
About an
person,
hour
I
and a
guess.
half.
But
I would say that's not usually the case, though, that the happiness lasts.
Yeah, happiness lasts
there's a
about
different
an hour.
kind of
I'm not arguing with you. I
nuance.
just think you have to acknowledge that it's not the eternal kind that we're talking about.
Yeah, so
Right.
that's, I think it's good to sort of mention that. It's
Right.
when are we talking about what? And when we're talking about happiness, like I'm hearing Malcolm, you're talking about figuring out what you want. I mean, happiness can be connected to feelings of mastery. Oh, I'm doing really
Mhm.
well. This is going well, so I feel happy. I succeeded at this. I feel happy. And then there's kind of, as you mentioned, Fred, sort of an eternal happy, or a happy vibration, or whatever you want to call it. So when we talk about happiness and presence, or presence and happiness, um, I think it might be helpful to some people anyway, and just whoever's watching this or whoever watches the replay, to notice the nuances in happiness, like the happiness that we create or experience, which is sort of momentary, meaning it's connected to a thing or a situation. And then there's the eternal sort of temporal happiness that's just underlying everything, as long as we're not in our own way and just allowing things to flow
Exactly.
because it's there.
Right.
The flow is there. It's just whether we're in the way of it or not.
One of my favorite stories in that regard is if you could imagine the athlete, like a pro soccer player or something who scores the goal, and we can all imagine them, running, with their hands.
It's
And
like the picture I used to make the event on Facebook was a little
right.
boy with his yeah.
Now, here's the thing about that. In the context of this conversation, I'm going to say something that I hope makes sense. The joy that athlete is experiencing in that moment, I don't think they really understand what that joy is, because they're attaching that joy to an outcome, to something that just occurred. They scored a goal, their team is winning, whatever that means to them. And all that's fine. Okay. But we already agreed that's temporary. In fact, how long does that joy last for that soccer player? Probably not real long. And what I would suggest, the real joy in that moment, if they realize that the joy wasn't really about the outcome, but that for a moment, somehow they get to stop seeking happiness. It's like for a moment, they're not trying to find it in some external thing, and they can just be. And that joy is the experience of just being without trying to find something outside of ourselves. It's funny, the title of today's presentation, Presence and Happiness. It's like presence is happiness, or at least happiness is an aspect of presence. So again, what we've been saying is it's right there. It's already there. We just sometimes, and again, there's the external stuff too. We keep coming back to that. It's awesome to score a goal, and it's awesome to be happy about that goal. But if we think that is the source of our happiness, then we spend our lifetime chasing it. We chase it from one to
You go, all right. Let's take the soccer player, right? You go right back to the scoring of the goal, right?
mm-hmm.
And that's like it's an ego thing again, right? You go right back to the ego, right? Like, I scored this, whether we win or not, I scored, or I scored the winning goal, or
Mm-hmm.
I participated in, whether we win or lose, I did my thing, I scored. So, so, but and that temporary happiness, once again, if you get into, you know, the different chemicals of the body, and they're not going to sit there forever. They're only going to be there for a
That's
moment,
right.
right? So that's as long as that happiness will be there, as long as that dopamine is in the brain, as long as what I'm talking about. Now later on, you might think about it again, and you get another little jolt of dopamine.
But you know what, though? That's why that car that I was saying earlier, it's really
Yeah,
difficult for that new car to generate that same joy day after day, year after year,
right.
because the receptors for that, and it's almost unique, like for that kind of happiness molecule, like that attaches to the cell, and that's the experience that Malcolm's talking about of happiness. Um, Eventually, I don't know what the word is, but they become kind of almost numb to it. Like it stops being as intense. The chemicals stop having the same effect on
It
us.
becomes banal.
So yeah, Banal is a good
Right.
word. And
Thank you.
yeah. So I mean, to like really create that car, to like imagine every day it's like my new car would require almost like a lot of work just to keep that same feeling, you know?
Right. Yeah, it's like
I'm
a
going to
crack
come
like.
in here if you don't mind, because we
Okay, go
actually
ahead.
have a new car.
Yay. What'd you get?
We have a BMW SUV, humongous. I think it's an X5 or whatever it's called. It's lovely, and it's cobalt blue, and it looks black until the sun hits it, and then it's blue, and it's gorgeous. And we've
Awesome.
got I think it's called merino leather seats. And I mean, even as I'm talking about it, just even thinking about the leather, I love the leather. I love the feel. It's so soft, even the smell of it. I love every time I get into that car. We've had it for a year and a half. So to me, it's still a new car. We've had it for a year and a half. And every single time I get in that car, it's like I'm in love or something. It's absolutely, I love the experience of getting in that car and feeling that leather and seeing that leather. And there's all sort of cool things. And there's a thing about, yeah, I mean, it's not a new car, it still feels new to me. There's something in the experience of me in connection with that leather,
Yeah,
me
it's your
needing that
presence, though.
leather.
You see,
Beg pardon?
you're present. You've
That's
become.
exactly what I was going to thank you. The difference between that, oh, I just got a new car and wow, and I'm somebody or whatever, and my experience of being with the car, or in this case, the leather, or even I work as a music therapist as well, and I've worked in I'm not sure what you'd call them in English, but like we used to call them old folks homes, elderly care centers, whatever. I can't think of what they're called now at the moment. And reigniting people's joyful memories by playing songs
Oh,
from
yeah.
when they were children, for example, if they have dementia or whatever, and watching that joy and the memories and how they relive things. And when we do that, we're present to something, even though it happened before. Something like scoring a goal. It doesn't have to be an ego thing where, yeah, I scored that goal. It was the ball went into that, and it was magic. And it's amazing how that happens. And there's so much happiness and experience of joy in that experience.
That's how little kids
That's not
experience it.
Beg pardon?
That's how little kids experience it.
Yeah. Thank you. But I mean, as well, adults. There's a
That's our
difference
hope, right?
between the experience of the moment as, hey, I scored the goal, yeah, and wow, that was magical, that moment, and that moment is magical for me always. For the rest of my life, that is a magical moment that I have. It's like walked into my DNA or something. And research has been done on what's called the negativity bias. A guy called Cacioppo around 1977 wrote an article on this. The negativity bias. Our brain we remember negative experience more easily and more quickly than positive experience.
That's probably a survival thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. However,
Yes.
there's an exception. I'm sorry, I cannot recall the name of the researchers who did a follow-up article, and it's in my second master's thesis. I'll find it and I'll write it in the group under this video, where a strong positive experience can override that negative
I get
experience,
that.
even though that negative experience has been there for 20 years or whatever. A strong positive experience can
It's
override
probably
that.
got to be somehow connected to the negative experience, but there's a million ways in which that could probably happen.
Yeah, and even you can build connections. That's where a lot of
Right.
the relation and somatic experience and all of that stuff, a lot of
I
therapy
love it
work
when
is
y'all
done on
talk
that.
brain talk.
But he's getting, I love turning Malcolm on. But it's that idea of this is so strong that I'm present to it. I'm present to that memory. And then happiness and presence becomes very clear.
Yeah.
Happiness and presence. It's not always that clear. So I'm just giving that as an example. It
Right.
doesn't have to be an ego thing.
Yeah, that's like an absolute, like there's an absolute world the way I look at it, where happiness just is. It's just eternal and infinite and, pervasive. But then there's a relative world, and in the relative world, which is really the world of the ego, well, happiness is a little more elusive. And we can be happy or not happy. Like, it's actually possible in the relative world to not be happy. Yeah, in the absolute, that's not an option, But I mean, I don't know. I have to think about that. I mean, everything is possible in the infinite world, but there's a background of happiness and peace that even can hold the sadness or the whatever else.
Yeah, there's space for it because there's no resistance to it,
Yeah,
and there's an
exactly.
It's like a constant acceptance to
Acceptance is really
what is, because it
exactly.
is.
Yeah.
And I can be, and one of the most fantastic experience I had, and some people think I'm nuts when I tell this, when my dad died, and this is a while ago, it was like one of the most painful experiences and one of the most fantastic experiences of my life. And we were crying and we were laughing because we remember my father and all the funny, crazy things he used to do, but also the pain of he's not physically here anymore. I can't hug my dad anymore. So there's that. But there was a constant beauty and in the just being with what is and accepting that that is life. And there's a joy, there's a happiness in that.
Yeah. And nobody could have told you that.
Oh, God, no.
Right? It's like that.
Well, I could have tried, but I wouldn't have known until I
right. And it would have been disrespectful, really, these empty words that people speak at those moments. But whatever it was in you that could discover that or allow that, to use your word, that's exactly what we're talking about, is it exists. There's no rule that says funeral equals sad or suffering,
forever and ever and ever.
I mean, whatever version of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, and there, of course, are cultures we know, like the, New Orleans culture and whatnot, that have the big celebrations with the funeral. I don't want to make it a rule that says, "Oh, now we should celebrate death," because that's just another rule. It's finding that freedom in ourselves.
Yeah.
This
beautiful.
Truth, that's all it is. Yeah, it is. That's a beautiful story.
Well, it's the freedom. I love that, finding the freedom in ourselves, because it is our expression of ourselves in the world. And it comes back to, like, Malcolm defining happiness. I mean, okay, what's happiness for you? There's that happiness that is the eternal, as we spoke of, that sort of, it's just there. But then as me, my expression in the world, what is grief for me? What is happiness for me? It is who I am in every moment. So my expression of being in every moment, and that's mine. Do you agree with that? I'm actually thinking of you, Fred, but I'm looking at Malcolm.
Yeah. Either one of us. Go ahead, Malcolm, if you got something to say about that.
Oh, well, I mean, I got lost in thought there for a minute, but it's your interpret, like when you're talking about the funeral, right? You know what I'm saying? And, the passing of somebody or whatever. And you have, I know Fred hates this word choice, but
I don't hate
there's
choice.
Yeah, you do. You hate that word. I've seen too many of your videos.
I choose not to take offense at that silly word.
Yes. But you know what I'm saying, it's you know what I'm saying, like how you look at it and how you perceive it and how you take it. Right. Sometimes you can go to a funeral and it's like so sad and so empty and so, you know what I mean, it's just so much until like you don't want to go to another one. You know what I'm talking about? And then you can go to New Orleans, go through a second line. And you know what I'm saying, everybody's celebrating the life, you know what I'm talking about, of that person, right? They're not, okay, you're passing on, okay, great. We're gonna celebrate the life of this person.
Yeah.
And it's all about that perspective, you know what I'm saying? And which avenue, you know what I'm saying, how do you perceive to take this thing, right? You know what I'm saying, life and death. How do you perceive to take it? Right. And for me, I think when it comes to happiness, me and Miriam and I could do an event together. right? And, I could be all upset because, there was only 25 people there and, we didn't make the money and all of this and all that. But Miriam's having fun with this thing. She's enjoying, she's laughing, she's having fun with it because, she's looking at it from, I get the experience. I get to talk to 25 people I never knew, right? She, she's looking at it from a different perspective to where it's happiness for her. But I'm looking at it from monetary value. I'm looking at it from all the negative ends. So, like when you go about and you choose happiness, like it's just, you have to make a choice, man. You have to, and now you got me kind of offended using the word choice, but you have to, sit back and really evaluate, do I really want to be, sad and depressed or whatever? Yeah, I'm going to be to a certain degree, but I don't want to get to that level of depression or sadness, right? I don't want to get to that, I want to be, and I want to enjoy the moment, right? Because this is my last moment with them or whatever the case is. And, and Miriam, you said something earlier about, you don't get the hug, right? Well, the brain doesn't know the difference between what's physically in front of you or what's imagined, right? Your body is going to respond the same way. So if you just close your eyes and imagine the hug and how you felt about that hug, your body and everything else is going to react and respond as if it is really happening. So, I just wanted to throw that part out there. But,
I'm going to throw something right back at you, actually, Malcolm, because you reminded me of something, if you don't mind, because I work with. You're so funny. I work
only
with
only on Mondays.
Sensory experience. The sensory experience is an added dimension, of course. So, for example, I mentioned earlier that I do use psychodrama at times in my therapeutic work with people. And the beauty of that is, as you say, Malcolm, the brain doesn't recognize the difference. So if someone is in the role of my father, I can hug that person and my body will experience that I am hugging my father.
Yes.
And it is so real for some people that they are able to release pain that they've had for ages when they have that sort of sensory experience. It can make a huge. Oh, finally, I mentioned before that I'm going to be starting a new group to work on regret and people who wish they had said things or regret having said something they wish they hadn't said or whatever. And the ability to be able to say that or take it back, even though the person may be dead, the experience can be incredible because the brain doesn't recognize the difference at that level. It's like I've finally got to say what I needed to say and I can release it. Or I finally got to apologize for what I said and I can release it, even though the person standing in front of me is representing a role and not that, and it isn't that particular person. It's magical. Magical, that kind of work. So I'm really glad you brought that up with the brain doesn't recognize the difference. It does, sometimes and many times, but no, in that particular instance, no, it doesn't.
Even in a situation where, just say, not to bring up anything, like you have a woman that's been through, an abusive relationship, right? And you get her to sit back and you get her to think about this guy, right? And the things that he did to her, and you got a punching bag in front of her, and you let her let go on that bag as if that bag was him.
Yeah.
And she will almost tear it off the chains, right? Because she's given it everything that she's got. In her mind, that bag is him, right?
Now, is that, I question whether, honestly, that's truly therapeutic or not.
Yes.
Really?
From my experience, it is.
Yeah,
right? From what I've seen.
I'm just putting it out. I'm not giving you an absolute.
Say more.
Yeah. And by the way, it may be a transitional moment where that was a moment where it was useful. But my experience now, you guys know, but maybe some people don't, that I was a holistic chiropractor for a long time. And the type of work I did, still do in a different form today, but it's called network spinal analysis. And it's really subtle energy work with regards to the nervous system. And in the early days of this work, the guy that created this work is a guy named Donnie Epstein is like a legit genius on this planet, like world-class visionary genius. And body of work he created, which network is just one part, is amazing. So in the early days of this work, people used to have these huge, like spontaneous catharses. I mean, they would scream and cry and relive old traumas, rapes, and all kinds of stuff. And it was really something to see. And Donnie, one of the things about him that I so admire, because that's pretty dramatic, and you can imagine it attracted an awful lot of people. And a lot of people, some people had very profound healings as a result of that. But Donnie's always looking like what's the next iteration? He's constantly evolving it. So he would check the person's spine and nervous system in the way that he teaches. And he's feeling for a certain degree of tension or stress in the system. And then he would do whatever he does. And then they'd go through this huge dramatic response, and he would check him again. And more often than not, nothing had changed in their body, in their nervous system. You know, in other words, they didn't necessarily release it. They just went through it again. You know,
Yeah.
they were just re-traumatizing themselves.
There's a difference, though, what you're talking about and what I was referring to and the way I understood
What,
it.
the psychodrama, you mean?
Beg pardon?
Just to be clear, I was talking more about the punching bag example, not all of it as a whole.
Yeah.
And by the way, again, even the punching bag within a certain controlled environment might be, but I would want to really know. That's the thing. I wouldn't take it for granted that just because there was some big experience that actual healing happened, like it literally changed the way their brain or nervous system perceives that experience. You know, that's something that needs to be assessed very carefully.
Mm.
You know,
I think there's a difference, a nuance again, and yes, Malcolm, I see you, because reliving stuff. Because I work also with craniosacral work, and we, you know, this unwinding and reliving and all of that stuff.
Amygdala hijack
and catharsis and blah blah blah. There's so many words, but there's a difference between re-experiencing and resolving.
Absolutely. That's the
and I'm going to even put my name up here because I thought that was pretty darn good. There's a difference between re-experiencing and resolving. And I'm looking at resolving because otherwise it's just doing exactly the same thing as what we're doing in a different way, where we keep reliving and reliving and reliving. And every time we see a snake, we're terrified of the snake. And every time we see whatever it is, and it's going again and again and again. That's not the same. It's resolving this situation so that it doesn't have to keep happening. Yeah.
And I would be willing to bet that when they really experience that resolution, like however you're defining it, if it truly happened, you'd also see their nervous system would have to change. It would be
it definitely does, and the energy flows more, and pain can disappear, and it's absolutely amazing. Malcolm, you had your finger up.
Malcolm.
Okay, so the thing is, in most of these situations, like when I was thinking about the bag, right, is because at that moment or in those moments where they were getting whatever, right, they felt like they couldn't fight back. Right. They felt like, like whatever the case is, they couldn't fight back. So, so that right there created a stress. That right there created, a high level of stress because they couldn't fight back. So once they get to the bag, they're actually allowed to fight back, which releases some of that stress and some of that tension. Now, I'm not saying that's as far as you go with that. Right. Of course, there's a process after that, but you're getting them to get rid of the stuff that they couldn't get rid of in that time or in that space.
Agreed.
So so that alone is going to relieve some of the stress, some of the tension, some of the things that's going on up here and cause a different chemical reaction as you move forward in the process. Right. But it's hard from my experience. I don't, like I can't speak for everybody. From my experience, it's harder for me to have to deal with you or work with you if I don't get some of that off of you, get some of that stress out of you, get some of that buildup out of you.
Yeah.
Once I get that buildup out of you, once I get to release some of that stress, you're not going to get rid of all of it because there's more work that has to be done. But once I get you to get that over with, it's I'm not gonna say it's easier, right? But it's easier for me to work with you and to help you move forward beyond that point.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
there's a bound up energy in the system that can absolutely be problematic in the way you're
Right.
talking about. And I would absolutely agree that any number of things, including hitting a punching bag, can sometimes free up that energy. So there's no argument there at all.
Fred, now that
Yes.
we're on you and we're going towards the end of our roundtable talk about presence and happiness, how how do you work with people with with that background of presence and happiness? How do you work with people, or what kind of suggestions do you have that people can do for themselves? Or do you have any offer that you have that is connected to presence and happiness?
Well, I mean, I could make the argument that that's really all I offer is
Yeah.
presence and happiness
Well said.
in one form or another. Practices are interesting that way. It'll take too long to go through it here, but I just made a video and I'm waiting to get it back from the editor that takes people through a process that I've been kind of tinkering with recently that seems to be really, really helpful in getting people to a state of presence really quickly. But there are a lot of them like that. For example, there's a teacher named Locke Kelly, Loch Kelly. I can't remember the name. He's got a few books, but one of them, maybe I could find that and put it in the comments too. But especially the audio, it's just a series of practices. He calls them glimpse practices. You're looking them up. And these glimpse practices are similar to what I was talking about. They can take people to a place of that sense of true self, a glimpse, because the ego cannot go to the true self fully, because in the pure presence of the true self, the ego, there's no ego to notice it, But, even when we come back, there's like the ripple effects that continue to affect us. So, in my work with people, we do a lot of these type of practices because I think it's about stringing enough of those together so that the brain begins to change and begins to consistently hold that new pattern, let's say. So we do a lot of that work, but then we also try and do it to me, I want, like any spiritual work that we do, I want it to have legs. I want you to be able to walk it into the world with you. So we try and apply these principles like in real time to something in your life that's troubling you, something in your life that you're having a hard time with. And it could be present or like regret, like Miriam, you were talking about. Anytime that you think of something and it causes a contraction somewhere in you, that's something you can work with. And especially coming from this place of presence, it gives you an opportunity, a perspective to be with that experience very differently. And from there, that's where resolution comes in my world, again, to use something Miriam said. It's quite magical, really, to see how when we really hold even the most, like something that's been with us for our whole life, deep feelings of insecurity or something, when you sit with it, the way it feels, the way you experience it somatically from that place of presence, it's remarkable how it can change. And I'm not saying it'll change in one time, but you begin to change it. It begins to dissolve like an icicle that's been living in your heart. It's quite beautiful to see that's and all that's happening is you're becoming more who you really are. That's all there is to it.
Thanks, Fred.
Sure.
How about you, Malcolm?
I mean, the only thing I would.
Or do you have an offer for people who might be watching this?
I had an offer too. Can I say the offer real quick?
Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead. Of course, I'll put your name back up there.
Well, the website's down right now, so it's under construction. But if you email me at that other link, reach out to me or message me on Facebook, whatever you do. First session is always on me. So if you want to explore all this stuff we've been talking about, or at least my perspective on it, let me know, and we'll set up an hour to do just that.
Great. Malcolm.
Okay. Well, I mean, first thing I would tell people, right? That's not we get depressed, we get all these different anxieties because we're looking at life as a whole, right? You're looking at your life as a whole when there's different pieces to this puzzle. And each one of these puzzles, you know what I'm saying, have to be well, each one of these pieces of your puzzles of your life has to be addressed, right? If not, you know what I'm saying, life becomes unbalanced. And when you look at your life as a whole, right, you're looking at things like, oh my God, you know what I'm saying, this, right? I don't have the money, I don't have this. You're looking at life, too much,
Fragmented.
right? So, you know what I'm saying, take the different pieces of your life, different areas of your life, right? Spirituality, career, health, right? Don't, and look at it individually and work within that realm individually in your life. You got 24 hours in a day, you got time to do it. If you break it down, you got at least 2 hours and a half to deal with each one of them. But anyway, so, you know what I'm talking about? So, and this way, that I'm doing my best in this area. I know that I'm doing my best when it comes to my finances. I know that I'm doing my best when it comes to spirituality. Instead of looking at the whole and look at all the gaps and fragmented parts of your life, get in close into your life so you can deal with each individual part individually, right? To one that's going to build your brain knowledge, that's going to thicken your brain. Because the more information you gather, the more time you spend with it, your brain thickens, right? It, density wise. So, so you become stronger in that. And as you go about these different parts of your life, you become stronger. Now you might be able to sit back and look back at it after you've balanced out everything as much as possible and say, I did that, right? I did that. And now you get back in there and go back to work. So that would be my little tidbit or whatever the case is for today. And if you want more information about that or different type of things that we use to help each other from the neuro side, from the coaching side, there's my email, my website. Just reach out, let me know who you are, what you want to do, and we'll break it down. We'll actually sit down with you and we'll break down these 12 and we'll try to prioritize your priorities so that, you know exactly what you're working on. Right. So, and, not saying we're going to disregard everything else, but let's take at least 3 of these out of all of these elements. Let's take 3 of them, focus on them 3, and then move forward from there. That's all I got.
Thank you, Malcolm. I'm just going to quickly put up a comment here.
Yeah, I saw that coming too.
I would love to find the secret to resolving. Well, we've been talking about that. Thank you for the comment. There are many, many things you can do to resolve. I'd like to mention, actually, sometimes I talk to people and they say things like, I don't want to go through that pain again. I don't want to feel that.
Right.
They think, if they're working with therapy or coaching or whatever, they're going to have to feel a whole bunch of pain and they don't want to do that. And that is a misunderstanding. Many times, the reason you're stuck in a situation or reliving a situation or painful situation is because you didn't feel the pain. You're avoiding it, right? The idea of I don't want to, that's exactly the choice you made unconsciously when you were whatever age, or I can't deal with it or whatever. It's too much for me. That's the choice. And it stayed the choice until now. And being 5 years old and experience something and being 25 or 35 or 55, there's a huge difference. The other thing I wanted to mention is I don't want to feel that pain. It's like, how do you know what it's going to feel like? You think you know, and then you're doing what Bobby Cobb calls time traveling.
Right.
You think you know what it's going to feel like. You think something's been painful. You think it's going to be that. It might be something completely different. Many times when we just open up to something that's happened, we breathe. Maybe we cry. Maybe we're angry. But very often it's just we start breathing. We release something. So, and then talking about something and feeling anger towards a person or grief when we've lost somebody or whatever, then it resolves itself. It's us being honest and owning our experience and not telling ourselves, I don't want to. that's what you decided, or I can't deal, or whatever. That's what you decided way back when, but you're not the same person as you were when it happened, and you might just be fine. And very often that is the case. Most often, in my experience, that is the case. Just going there and accepting that and giving that space and being with it opens up to a new experience where whatever problem it is can be resolved. And there are many, many, many forms of therapy and coaching to work on that sort of thing. And as Fred and Malcolm have mentioned, you're welcome to contact either of them. You can also contact me. My website is on there, as you can see, in my email address. So you're welcome to contact me. I work in many different ways. I use EMDR, which is eye movement that is used to help the brain, the sides of the brain, integrate and speak with each other. Because a lot of times when you're overwhelmed, I know I can see you smiling again, Malcolm. I'm talking brain.
You didn't see what he did before that.
What did he do? Yeah, but that actually happened to me. I did try EMDR and my eyes went cross-eyed. So, but the idea is to get the brain to communicate with itself, each side, instead of being stuck in something and going over and over and over and over again and not moving.
Right.
There are many, many ways to what we call bilateral stimulation, many ways to encourage the brain, stimulate the brain to speak with itself. So I use several of those kinds of therapeutic tools because very often just talking about things is another form of re-traumatization. We're just talking and we're talking and we're talking and we're talking and we're talking, and we don't get to the resolution. We don't get past it. So you're more than welcome to contact me if you'd like to ask any questions. You can also write in our Facebook group, the Presence Posse, under this talk if you have any questions, and we can get back to you. So you're more than welcome to do that as well. So I will round off there. I was going to remove my banner. There we are. Another comment just out. Yeah, we're out of time. I'm just going to put it up here. We don't really have time to speak to it, but I've heard that 21 days stick to something will make a new habit. Have you heard that? Malcolm, you want to say something about that? Because I mean, it's the more connections you make in your brain, it's like building a muscle. It's going to get stronger, whatever you focus on. But how would you like to address that quickly?
21 to 28 days. If you do something for 21 to 28 days, you will create a habit. You know what I'm saying? Your brain will automatically, it does that automatically, right? Then if you continue with the process, now you get into changing lifestyles, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know what I'm saying, 21 to 28 days of, just doing something repetitively, doing it every day for those 21 days will create that habit. It'll get to a point that after the 21 or 28 days that, you know what I'm saying, if you get up and you don't do it, your brain is like, hey, what we supposed to be doing? This is what we're supposed to be doing about this time, right? So it's just, it's just 21 to 28 days to create a habit. You know what I mean? And if you want to create the habits of whatever your habit you're looking for, then there's a process to that, right? You know what I'm saying? You just got to get the information in front of your mind, right? So the brain can take that information, because not to go too deep into it, you know what I'm saying? Your right brain is, your imagination and all your happy go stuff. So you got to fill that in, but then you also got to fill in that left brain with information, right? Numbers, you know what I'm saying? Logic, letters, whatever, right? You got to fill that up in order to get the whole brain effect so that you can achieve the things that you want to achieve.
You actually answered what I was going to ask, because there's something about doing something for 21 days or 28 days and it doesn't work, because there's a mindset connected to this. If I'm doing it and resisting it the whole time, then I'm also building the habit of resisting the very thing I claim to want to change. So there has to be some sort of cooperation going on, or you're actually reinforcing a conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a quick answer to the question, and thank you very much for the question. And gentlemen, as always love being with you, and thank you for being on this talk with me. And for those of you who are watching, and those of you who may watch after this, we will meet again next Monday at the usual time, and daylight savings thing will have resolved itself because Europe will be catching up to America and all of that stuff. Yeah. So it will be at the usual time. We'll make an announcement in the Facebook group, the Presence Posse. And the topic for next week is presence and fear. It will be a live and interactive talk, which means that anybody watching who wants to join in and speak to us and ask us questions with your face and your voice, you are more than welcome to do so. But you're also welcome to write your comments and questions if you don't want to be part of the interactive talk. So Presence and Fear next Monday, same time, same place. Thanks, everybody. See you next week. And thanks to Malcolm and Fred.